about. I hate when you do that. I don't hate it. I love it.
Wait a minute. I didn't change the name of the episode when I created it earlier. Hold on. Unlearning. I'm going to do this like literally live.
While Sto does that, welcome to Office Hours, where we literally practice what we teach. And today's episode is all about unlearning perfectionism, which really is about showing up authentically, which is really what you get from us every week we do this. Because perfection is an impossible standard. It's not a real thing. It doesn't exist. And it often is what holds so many of us back. So that's what we're talking about today. Welcome to Office Hours, everybody.
Yes, welcome. Let me fix the there we go. Fix the format of the show. I didn't fix that earlier, but yes, welcome. Episode 80 of Office Hours. I did not change the episode title earlier, so I just fixed that now. But yeah, 80 episodes. Wow. 20 away from 100, which is kind of insane to think about. Thank you all for joining us. Yeah, we've been doing this for a few years now at this point. All types of topics, all types of things that we've talked about at this point. Not even just, I know a lot of you are here for like marketing stuff, but we've talked about a lot of different things here as well. So yeah, check out all 80 episodes. And yeah, so today we're talking about unlearning perfection, because I feel like that's something a lot of us deal with, and that can kind of hold us back from our creative journeys. And yeah.
Yeah. So here's my thing about perfectionism. Y'all know I always go on a little like rant. There's no such thing. It's a social construct. It doesn't exist. And a lot of what we think of as perfect is really white supremacy, it's patriarchy, it's elitism, it's all these things. And so for those of us who come from systemically marginalized groups, it's impossible for us to achieve any standard of perfect because it's not based on us. It's not designed for us. And so what it does, and this, like, if you're feeling imposter syndrome or self-sabotage, like all of that stuff fits into this thing, because we think that we have to achieve this certain way of being in order for us to be good enough or worthwhile enough or ready enough or whatever it might be. And all of that does is make us work harder while also undermining and undervaluing ourselves. And so one, unlearning perfectionism and instead choosing to show up authentically and naturally is an act of resistance. Especially now with like so much AI and computer generated stuff, like it's our flaws, our imperfections, our little quirks that make us relatable, that make us human, that make us interesting, dare I say. And so that's really the foundation, is there's no such thing as perfect. And the standards of perfection that have been imposed on us are there to promote a certain way of being that's not for or by many of us.
And just off rip, before I even dive into the politics of it all and stuff like that, perfectionism doesn't exist. Nobody is 100% perfect. It is impossible to be whether it's a so I do think that that's used against us in a lot of different ways, and whether it's the capitalist system and stuff like that. And so I think once we start with the foundation that like nobody is perfect, we can't be perfect, I think that already sets us up for some version of more success. There's no way my internet is not. Maybe my internet's slowing down. I'm not sure what's happening. Okay. Oh my God.
You were like cutting in and out, but I don't know if it was me or if it was you. So I'm trying to like play it cool. But the last thing I'm not trying to mess up the show flow. But the last thing I heard you say was that this like pressure around being perfect, it's actually like counter to our success, right? So while you are working on getting it perfect, someone else is already doing the thing that you want to do imperfectly, but they're doing it and they're connecting with their audience and they're putting themselves out there. And honestly, like most importantly, they're allowing themselves to learn and reevaluate and make adjustments based off of their imperfections. So if you do something in this vacuum and only when you feel like it's perfect, you put it out, you've done so much work, energy, emotion, like you've done so much stuff that no one knows or sees. So they don't get to appreciate and respond to it. But two, you're not then giving yourself enough space to take in new information and then readjust and fix and improve and grow and change and adapt. So it's a different way, like I think there's so much pressure to put out a final perfect product versus allowing yourself to like be in process. And for those of us that are creatives, like the process is just as important, right? Like it's the making that matters and feels good. And so allowing yourself to recognize the value of the process and acknowledging that the process is messy and imperfect and all these things. And then you share the process and then you share the outcome of that process. It allows you to learn and it allows your audience to grow with you and they get to see the evolution and the improvement and the changes. So you really are, by like sitting on things until they're perfect, whatever that arbitrary definition is for you, you're really holding yourself back in so many ways.
And then I guess the question is, how do you get past that, right? Like what? Because I don't think it necessarily shows up in like, I have to be perfect, right? Like I think whether it's procrastination, which I'm a professional procrastinator, or other, techniques, I guess, that we use that doesn't necessarily directly point to perfectionism, but indirectly, I guess. And so how do we get past that though?
That's a really good question. And part of what you pointed out is to start to become aware of all the ways that perfectionism hides. And it might be it, and for each of us it's different. And this is like some core shit, right? It might be that like you learned that you're only worth being loved if you do things perfectly. And so that's what it's about. Or you might have learned, I don't know, right? Like for a lot of us, this pressure,
so many different ways.
Like under capitalism, so many of us learn that our value is in what we do, is in our productivity, is in our earning, is in our service, and so that's a really uncomfortable thing to have to be like, no, if I put something out imperfectly, people will still like me. I'm still right. So on like, not to be all therapy, but doing your self-work and understanding what perfection means to you and how it shows up for you is really important, because then you can start to figure out, okay, am I putting high expectations on myself, or am I trying to protect myself from something? Is this perfectionism a way of protecting myself? Which doesn't answer your direct question, Sto, which was like, well, what do we do about it? But this like becoming aware of where perfectionism sits for you is the first part of it. That part is really, really important, because then once you know, then you can start working around that. And honestly, y'all, like it's also just feeling like it's going to be really scary and really terrible and doing it. Like be imperfect and then see what happens. And most of the time you'll be imperfect and you see that people responded. They didn't even think you were imperfect. They thought it was great. But that's a tangible thing you could do, is like to feel the fear, but do it anyway. And then see how you feel after that. And that will help kind of shift from some of this, like, oh my God, it has to be perfect all the time.
And that's what I was going to suggest, is just that like doing it anyway is I think a lot of us will be surprised, like how once you take that first step and you're like, oh wait, it really ain't that bad. let me keep doing it. And again, sometimes it is kind of like a daily effort, right? Like even just putting it into music terms, like, you know, you spend one day working on something, and then, you know, you take that step in, but then the next day you come back in and you're like, oh my God, it's not exactly the way I want it to be. And but if you keep pushing along, and you keep trying, and you keep putting in attempts, I think that's really where putting some of that fear away, like, go, because, like, again, and you won't even, sometimes I think we don't even realize we're putting that fear of perfectionism away and stuff like that as we're moving along. And Nora's talked about this a lot as well, is that, like, the creative process, putting anything out in general, is a taxing, exhausting, tiring process. And I think even when you allow yourself to kind of lean into that, like, it's not easy. It's not this, you know, I don't know. We see the documentaries about albums getting made and all this, and it's all glorious, and we're in the studio. But like, we all know that the creation of anything is taxing, and it takes a lot. And so just allowing yourself to go through that and understand it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be without growing pains and without difficulties and stuff like that. I think not even just perfection in our performance sake, but like perfection in, I want this whole kind of process to be, you know, without conflict, without flaw, without anything going wrong. And that's just not how anything works. And so just putting yourself in the position to keep trying and to keep attempting every time you go to bed, I think, is super important.
The breaking it down into small steps can be really helpful, because
Yes.
if you put out an imperfect project, you're like, but this is my child, my baby, but if it's like, okay, we'll put out an imperfect Instagram story, that's easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's easy, right? Like,
it's easier.
Or put out, and this is, some of you have heard me say this before, but like, I was terrified of being on camera because of my own I was like, what if I mess up? It's going to be caught on video forever. Like, ugh. And so we started with Instagram Live back when it only existed for 24 hours.
And it could just get erased after we had everything fucked up.
Then it's gone. And so allowing yourself to do the easy first step, so that you kind of save up your energy for the harder next step, right? And you can kind of gradually build up to it. And then you've also seen this on office hours, like the things that I feel are most awkward or imperfect, those are the things we lean into. I'm like, y'all, today I'm awkward. Here's our quirky weirdness. Like, and by naming it, you can take an ownership of it. So for an artist, it's like saying, look, this album cover isn't done yet, but I wanted to share it with you all. What do you think? How do you feel about it? I didn't want to sit on it. Like, I was name it. Your audience will relate to overthinking. Your audience will relate to anxiety, to perfectionism, to self-doubt, to all of these things. And so you can share it in ways that feel comfortable for you. But naming that you're doing something imperfect somehow creates this permission to be imperfect rather than the expectation of imperfect. And y'all, like, perfection is not relatable. Have you ever seen someone perfect and been like, that's who I want to hang out with? No, we want to hang out with the human person. We want to hang out with the relatable person. And that's what you're doing with your audience, right? You're building a human to human connection. And so these are little ways that as you do your self-work and communicate with your audience, like who you really are, and we're all human, we're flawed, we're imperfect, the more your audience is able to connect with that. So it is like those little things, just, it's really giving yourself permission. And then trusting that your audience is going to be there to see the end, right? That this will not be their only impression of you. So as they see the whole picture, they also form an idea of you that will be accurate to who you are. Because I think a lot of us just don't want to misrepresent ourselves.
Yep.
And so that's the vulnerability, which is why a project, I can control how I represent myself. But videos, Instagrams, newsletters, websites, those things feel a little bit more like, yeah, I don't even have words for it, but you see like my body
Permanent.
like,
Yeah.
scary.
Yeah.
And so start with what you're comfortable with, but y'all feel the fear and do it anyway, because you're holding yourself back.
Yeah, and then it's, I don't care what it is. I don't care if you're creating something. I don't care if you're studying for something. I don't care if you're going for, a more long-term goal or something like that. Like, perfectionism doesn't exist. That 10 out of 10 trail, there's going to be days where you're not feeling great. There's going to be days where things don't necessarily go according to plan. There's going to be days where you sound a little out of tune, or where you don't nail that line, or where your website isn't working the way you wanted to, or you didn't say exactly what you wanted in the newsletter, or the email that you wanted didn't, you made them like, there's so many. It's the human experience, unfortunately, is being imperfect and making mistakes. But what's also part of that process is learning from those things, and then going to bat again, and knocking it out of the park and stuff like that. And so, I'm not saying we have this like all-inclusive, one-size-fits-all cure to perfection, but even just giving yourself a chance, and again, trying, and not getting stuck in that paralysis of being perfect. You're already doing everything you can to resist, and I think that's what's most important.
I was just, as you were talking, Sto, I was just thinking about like, just, it's such a unrealistic expectation of us, right? Like,
on so many levels.
And like this moment that we're in, where everything we do is captured for eternity, it's so much it's not natural. Like, what's natural is our imperfections, is our making mistakes, is our stumbling, fumbling, crumble, like this of like always being curated and perfect, and is like I'm watching you fix your hair and I'm like, or is my braid okay, like even throughout history, like we haven't looked at ourselves so much
right
as we do now. And so it's also just remembering that in the grand scheme of things, what's really important to you. And I think for most of you, it's putting your music out there. It's connecting with your audience. It's your art being received. And that's only going to happen if you put yourself out there. Which also makes me think about like, we have a whole episode, I can't remember which number it is, about it's called like Mystery as a Brand, and how being mysterious, like how you're self-sabotaging and blocking yourself. And that's another way of like, because we want to be perfect, we'll just be mysterious rather than like owning something, taking a stand on something, right? These are all these it's all these avoidance techniques and tactics that we use. And so part of unlearning perfection is really just letting yourself take up space. And it's okay. However you show up that day.
Yeah, I was gonna look up the episode, but I think it's like mid-50s or something like that. Mystery as a Brand.
It's a good episode, and we'll link it below so you can catch it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's, some of y'all really do be hiding behind that as like and like we get it. Like I did that at one point, like not wanting to put myself out there like that. But it really, you'd be surprised. And this is the last part I'll kind of end on here, is like Nora said, like being perfect isn't relatable. Those mistakes, that growth, like, I don't know, we talk all the time, at least in other journalistic spots, about like the underdog story. That starts with mistakes being made, if we really want to get into that. But like outside of the capitalistic, narrative of it all, like your fans, your supporters, they will relate to you putting yourself out there like that. And it's because they've done the same thing. Like that's really what it is. They're not looking to see someone that's 12 out of 10, never did anything wrong. Like they're looking for someone that is on the same playing field. And the reality is, as humans, we all are on the same playing field. But it's, I think some independent artists really are so busy comparing themselves to people who aren't on our playing field, that they want to put up this persona that like, oh, I'm XYZ and I'm adjacent to this person. But it's like, I'm sorry, bruv, you're not. And that's okay. Like, lean in more into who you are, not who you're trying to be. You shouldn't be trying to be anybody to begin with. That's a discussion for a completely different day. We're talking about perfection, not about therapy. So, whatever. But your fans will relate to you. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've seen artists talk about, well, I started here and that's not where I wanted to be, but I worked and I've stumbled and I've made mistakes and I did this, but now I'm here. And so many people relate to that more than just, I'm perfect and I've never done anything wrong. No one relates to that.
No, that's the kid that got made fun of in school, where you're like, oh, you're perfect, right? Like we naturally relate to and something you said, Sto, like comparison is also really dangerous for all of us. So part of unlearning perfectionism or perfection is to stop comparing yourself to others. You don't know what help they have, what support they have, what they're hiding, what they're photoshopping, what they're like, you just don't know. And so we often tend to overestimate other people and underestimate ourselves. Sometimes it's the flip, but sometimes we think that other people are like more prepared or more expert and we're not. And so just check it. Like, it's a really good practice to just check, like, where is this thought even coming from? Do I really believe this? Or have I been told I should believe this? And then just these are things that will change gradually, but you owe it to yourself to give your art 100% of what you want to give it, perfect or imperfect. I'm dead that you're wearing the Happy Eddie shirt.
Oh. Hey.
Which we should do a Housewives episode soon. So all of that to say, y'all, like, and this is also a good place to have a shine page rather than focusing on the places where you're like not perfect. Focus on your skills. What are the things you're great at? What are the things you're succeeding at? Like, I talk about this all the time, but a shine page is a place where you actively write down all your successes and all the little wins and all the little field wins. Like, why are you boying me?
No. Relax before you start cooking me. I'm about to be out here defending your ass. Okay, listen. As a guy who's like, a shine page, I don't want to do anything like that. That's not very manly. Listen, you would be surprised how often just writing down even your smallest accomplishments helps you to get into a better frame of mind, not just in terms of what you've done, but just in like, okay, wait a minute. Like, I'm actually doing stuff out here. So many of us are caught in this cycle of, like Nora just said, comparison, of feeling like we're not doing enough, that we're not productive. But that's one, we should be gauging ourselves by that metric anyway. But yes, I promise you, if you take a second to write down what you've accomplished, what you've done, even just within the day, like you woke up and ate something today. What? That's a dub. That's a W. That's a win. Okay. So like that stuff, you can, even small stuff like that is worth talking about. And so I don't know, like, at least even for myself, even when I used to hear Nora talking about it, I used to be like, oh my God, I'm not a Barbie girl. Okay. I'm not writing any shit down like that. But you'd be surprised how helpful that is in terms of helping see yourself in a better light, which allows you to kind of put yourself out there in a better light. So get a damn shine page. I might as well just throw it in with like, get a website, get a newsletter, get a shine page. God damn it. So there you go. All right. Get off my back.
Listen, if you've made it this far in today's episode, tell us in the comments something that you're proud of yourself today. Yeah. Whenever that today is that you're like, we want to support you, but also that happens when you support yourself, like brag on yourself, love on yourself. Like, this is the community for that. So if you've watched this episode and it was useful, share it with your community, because this is how we create shifts in culture and the music business and creative entrepreneurship spaces. Make sure you hit the like and the subscribe. Hit the like and the subscribe.
There you go.
Get a newsletter, get a website, get a Shine page, free Palestine, keep talking about it, keep talking about the things that matter in the world. Even if you don't feel like you're 100% expert, talk about it, learn, and then become more expert. Like, this is a good example of that. And I don't know what we're talking about our next episode, but we'll have another one for you in 2 weeks.
That's because we haven't planned them out yet. I was looking at the spreadsheet earlier. We haven't planned, but that's okay. Free Palestine, newsletter, website, drink water, stretch, women's basketball. Very interesting. I'm going to leave it there. Take a peek. Angel Reese, come on now. All right. We'll be back soon. We're out.